Right. So while the UK is facing a day in The Hague, along with the US, for being complicit in the actions by Israel against the people of Gaza, now the rap sheet against the UK may be about to grow due to potentially being implicated in the recent strikes on Lebanon, particularly Beirut. And once more, it comes down to those arms export licenses the UK has suspended a tiny fraction of, but refuses to cancel more of them. And it is one of those that might now be carrying further legal consequences for the UK. Along with the UK government, arms sales executives could also find themselves having a day in the dock, and it once more centres around the export of F-35 fighter jet parts, something the UK government felt it could get away with because they don't end up directly supplied to Israel, and could therefore not be held accountable for the blue and white state getting hold of them. But it seems they're very much wrong in their thinking there, and as a recent act of atrocity in Lebanon has now shown, it might not just be in relation to Gaza the UK government finds itself criminally liable in relation to now either. Right, so it's a pretty safe assumption at this moment in time to say the Israeli government, the Netanyahu regime, is out of control, and with no restraint being levied on them, with the US consistently providing cover to them, along with other close allies like the UK government of that Zionist without qualification Keir Starmer, they are becoming more and more emboldened to not even try and hide the genocidal actions they are intent on carrying out, not in any way seeking to reduce the conflict happening in the Middle East, but expand it as much as it likes in order to, they hope, eventually bring in Western forces to aid them further. As they continue to pound Gaza, however, more and more Israeli focus is on Lebanon, a nation they have invaded before and are intent on seemingly doing so again. Where the likes of the US and UK might have provided diplomatic cover for the atrocities committed against occupied Palestinian territories, though, taking on a UN member state with full voting rights is another kettle of fish completely. The US and the UK are bulking a bit more at that, and is a much harder sell, of course. But of course, the complicity may already be there for having aided Israel militarily already. And everything we've witnessed over the past almost year in Gaza, and now more and more in Lebanon, and especially Beirut. The issue facing the UK specifically at this point is the ongoing supply of F-35 jet parts, when F-35 jets are being supplied to Israel. Even though we only make certain parts of these jets in the UK, according to Middle East Eye, the UK contribute about 15% of an entire jet. The government excuse is that these parts go to third parties, not Israel directly, for further assembly. This is now facing a challenge, though, a judicial review even, in the High Court. The challenge is being brought jointly by the Global Legal Action Network, or GLAN, and a Palestinian human rights organisation called al-haq, and they have informed the UK government, ministers, and arms sales execs that they could be indicted for aiding and abetting war crimes if they continue to transfer jet components, which then get used by Israel, to genocidal effect. Here's an excerpt from Middle East Eye's coverage on this story. Shawan Jabarin, al-Haq's general director, said Israel has been carrying out genocidal attacks on Palestinians in Gaza for nearly a year. We know that Israeli airstrikes and bombs using F-35 fighter jets have devastated densely populated areas, including shelters for displaced Palestinians, Jabarin said. The insurmountable evidence that Israel is committing violations and international crimes means the UK government can't feign ignorance. In response to the letters, a spokesperson for the Department for Business and Trade said that the global 20-country F-35 program has a significant dependence on the UK, which provides unique and critical components. It is not possible to suspend licensing of components to Israel without undermining the program overall, including its broader strategic role in NATO and our support to Ukraine, the spokesperson said. We have an unwavering commitment to the security not just of this country, but to our allies around the world, especially at a time when we face increased global insecurity and volatility. A Foreign Office spokesperson directed Middle East Eye to comments made by Foreign Secretary David Lammy earlier this month, in which he also noted that suspending all F-35 licenses would undermine the global supply chain. The Ministry of Defence, MOD, did not respond to MEE's requests for comment. I'm minded in light of that to recall the not so long ago massive news that a Foreign Office diplomat, Mark Smith, resigned from his long career at the Foreign Office and the Department for International Development before that, over the issue of complicity in war crimes. The fact he raised this with Lammy, and Lammy has, to all intents and purposes, ignored him. Yet here we have ministers potentially facing a day in court for complicity, and still they sing from the same hymn sheet. They really do think they are untouchable over this, don't they? That's intensely worrying. We also now have the advisory ruling from the International Court of Justice, of course, that Israel's occupation of Palestine and its territories is unlawful, And when the UN General Assembly have just voted on this the other day to a resounding affirmative result, the UK, as per usual, abstained in its cowardice. Everywhere that Israel use F-35s, therefore, could land the UK government of Keir Starmer in hot water over more charges of complicity, and that remains in place for as long as F-35 parts are being supplied by us. It doesn't matter that the 20-nation project that constructs F-35 jets would be hindered if the UK suspended sales of their components to Israel. The project shouldn't be supplying a nation accused of a litany, a massive list now, of genocidal war crimes. By now it should be bloody obvious, but of course too many in our government are bought and paid for by the Israel lobby, which seems to be speaking louder than our complaints are. And Lamy is no different as this handy graphic by Israel lobby tracker, who consistently hold pro-Israel MPs to account on social media, shows, with Lamy having abstained in last November's ceasefire vote, brought by the SNP as that was, having signed a letter supporting military action by Israel in the West Bank and Gaza, has accepted £70,000 from pro-Israel donor Gary Lubner, a guy whose family fortune was made in apartheid South Africa and whose son is the current chair of Young Labour. And of course his grand total of pro-Israel donations coming in now at over £100,000. And that's without even mentioning ties to Labour Friends of Israel on top of that. But Israel's expansion of its atrocities will add to the UK's rap sheet too when F-35 jets are involved. And this is where liability in relation to Lebanon now lies. Here's an excerpt from Al Jazeera laying out what happened and exposing the issues the UK now potentially faces. Lebanon's Ministry of Public Health says at least 14 people have been killed and 66 wounded in an Israeli air attack on a southern suburb of the capital, Beirut. The national news agency, NNA, reported that 5 children were among the casualties from Friday's attack on a building in Jammus Street. The agency said an F-35 jet hit the residential area with 2 attacks. The Israeli military said it carried out a targeted strike in the Lebanese capital, targeting top Hezbollah commander Ibrahim Akil and other senior commanders of the Radwan Special Forces unit. Hezbollah later confirmed that Akil had been killed in the attack. So an F-35 jet, arguably the deadliest fighter aircraft in the world today, was used to strike a residential area. 5 children were casualties in order to take out a Hezbollah commander called Ibrahim Akil. Israel chose to time this attack, incidentally, so it coincided with Friday rush hour. People returning home from work, kids returning home from school, time to cause maximum collateral damage, you might say. Certainly, I cannot argue with the comment that was issued in relation to this by the Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati, who said the attack proves again that the Israeli enemy does not value any human, legal, or moral considerations. But this, of course, is an Israeli attack using an F-35 aircraft, parts of which are produced here in the UK. 15% of them are, which the UK won't suspend the delivery of, which in whole or in part or via a third party end up in Israel. It's not a warning just coming from commentators like me or human rights organisations like GLAN or al-haq either, as 37 MPs have raised the alarm over the exemption for F-35 parts, because the excuse Starmer's government have given to do this has raised alarm bells with them as well. And this is exactly why these agencies have invoked a judicial review now, because the government have justified this move to exempt the F-35 parts using a legal provision that has never previously been invoked before, and which these human rights organisations believe requires parliamentary oversight. Even if it were to come to that, Parliament gets that oversight with Starmer's massive majority, any motions that come out of that would likely pass. But again, the publicity and the options, the optics of it, would shine another uncomfortable light on Starmer and co.'s determination to keep aiding and abetting Israel, not just in its atrocities in Palestine, but now Lebanon as well. There has to be a reckoning for this amongst our politicians. There has to be a consequence for consistently ignoring barbarity and atrocity, because they are being committed by a nation with too much influence in their party, in our politics behind the scenes. They fail to serve us here and respect international law there because, again, donors speak louder. There must be consequences for politicians again, because they are acting now like there are none, and it can't go on. It's a slippery slope of corruption otherwise. Meanwhile, on the same day that Israel launched attacks on Lebanon, in this case, the pager attacks, the US decided to sanction Iran over human rights abuses instead. You really couldn't make that up. And again, this is what politicians are doing when there is too much undue influence behind the scenes of the Israel lobby. It really is a pervasive problem in the global West amongst our governments. But if the US hoped this would offer a bit of a distraction, then it didn't quite work out that way. As this video recommendation will tell you all about, is your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.